The Lamar Jackson situation with the Baltimore Ravens just has to end one way or the other. We talk about why it's been so exhausting, why the Ravens haven't spent in free agency. We talk about Calais Campbell. We talk about the draft and so much more Baltimore Ravens content coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us today on this Thursday, making us your first listen each and every day. We're free and available. You subscribe for free on YouTube, subscribe for free in audio form. We're 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. So if you want that daily Ravens content, we're here for you Monday through Friday. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And we're back here Thursday, and we have a very special guest. It's the hype man for the hype intro music. It's IngravenVids. And Ingraven, with this offseason, I know for a lot of people it's been very frustrating. There was a survey from gambling.com that came out that said the Ravens have the third most negative fan base at the start of free agency. A lot of this has to do with the Lamar situation. We've been talking about it seemingly every day for the seems like weeks and months and even years at this point. And it just seems like this offseason has been so exhausting. And the situation between Baltimore and Lamar and Ingraven just feels like one way or the other, it's not coming to a resolution anytime soon. But at the same time, it feels like it has to end for the sake of both parties.
Yeah, it's been crazy. It's been crazy. And it's like throughout the entire process, we hear all these different stories and rumors and reports, and we see tweets and we see this and we see that. And it's almost like we've heard so many different things, but at the same time, we've heard a lot of nothing, too. So much of what we heard, it's like we have to draw our own conclusions to things, and we have to try to piece different different pieces of the puzzle together and whatnot to see what things mean, because we really haven't heard anything direct from anybody. So we're just waiting. It is a process that really tests your patience as a Ravens fan, even just a fan of football in general, because not only are Ravens fans watching and waiting for this, it's fans of other teams too. That the survey that said that the Ravens were the third most negative fan base, I was surprised that they were that low. I thought that it would be a lot higher, especially a lot of stuff that I've seen on Twitter, on YouTube, Facebook, all that good stuff. So being number 3, and I think the Bengals were number 1. I know they were up there, and I forgot who the other team was. But we're just waiting. And one day it seems like, oh man, we're going to get a resolution real soon. But then the next day it's like, oh, okay, no, we ain't getting anything anytime soon. So whenever that day does come that we get something concrete and like obviously the franchise tag, whichever franchise tag they applied on him, that was the first step. And that was obviously the non-exclusive tag. But now we're like, all right, what's going to happen next? Is he going to sign an offer sheet? Is another team going to give him an offer? Who's it going to be? Is some people have been saying there have been rumors of some teams offering him something. Other people have said they're not. We just don't know. It's so much that we just don't know. And I think that that's one of the most frustrating things for people is when they don't know. And it drives people crazy, especially when it comes to your favorite football team. And a lot of people's favorite player on their favorite football team, Lamar Jackson, and just all the uncertainty that surrounds him and his future with the Ravens. They don't know. And until we do know, we just got to be patient.
Right. And, you're right. There's been every day, it seems like. I mean, yesterday we had the fake DMs coming out, Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, his sources saying Lamar's done with the Ravens and the representative that's not approved by the NFLPA. The NFLPA has their hands in everything too, and that's a whole different conversation. But how do you think this has been handled by both sides, Ingraven, when you're talking about the Ravens in the negotiating Lamar Jackson and his negotiating on his own behalf? Do you think it's been handled well? Do you think it's been handled poorly by both sides? Where are you there?
Oh, that's a really, really, really good question. We really haven't heard much from either side directly. There could have been leaks here and there, but we haven't heard from either side much directly. Every time that we've heard from Eric DeCosta, he'll answer questions about negotiations. Oh, they were talking to Lamar, trying to get something done. We want him here, and then from Lamar. We've seen tweets about the whole 133 mil in the first 3 years, I think it was, but we don't really hear anything too concrete on what's going on if things are going positively or things are going negatively. So it's really hard to gauge how things have been handled. But I guess since we really haven't heard much directly from either side, I guess things are going. I can't really say they're going good or going bad. But as far as how they've handled it, I guess they've handled it good. Because you don't see anybody slandering each other. You don't see the Ravens coming out and slandering Lamar directly. You don't see Lamar coming out and slandering the Ravens directly. So that's a good thing right there in itself. But at the same time, there have been a lot of different leaks and different stories and whatnot, different articles written about each side. And that's what I say, we've heard so many different things, but it's so much that we just don't know. We just don't know. We don't know what's true or not. We don't know which article should hold more weight versus a different one. And there's been so much speculation. So it's really hard to tell. For me personally, it's really hard to tell how both sides have been handling it because it's so much that we don't know. But I guess since we don't know so much, then I guess both sides are doing their job.
Yeah, and I think that is the reason, you talked about it, why it's so frustrating for people, because people just want to have an understanding of why it's taking so long, why there hasn't been an extension or a trade. And to me, Ingraven, when talking about just why this needs to end one way or the other, one, it's been extremely exhausting, I think, for everybody. I'm sure it's exhausting for the Ravens and for Lamar and obviously for the fans and the media and everybody that's involved with this situation. And it's so funny. I kind of talked about this yesterday where I remember the days when people were saying, back in the day when people were talking about, we want the Ravens more in the national media. We want to see them because they were never talked about for years. They were the underdogs. They were never talked about. And now here we are every single day. It almost seems like 24 hours a day. It's Ravens, Lamar. But with this thing, it's almost hindering the Ravens in a way this offseason. The Ravens have Lamar in that $32.4 million franchise tag hit. That's fully guaranteed, takes up 14.5% of their cap right now, Ingraven. And that's no small amount of change right there. It's a big amount of money, especially when you're talking about the Ravens right now only having, I believe at the time of this recording, around 7 or 8 million in cap space. Yeah, and we're seeing teams go out there, improve their rosters. I'm not saying Lamar is the only reason why the Ravens haven't made moves this offseason, but it's not helping. With the franchise tag and extension, if you make that first year cap hit low, would clear up some money for this year at least, and maybe you can make that a backloaded deal, a trade. You know what you're getting. You free up the cap space, and you have, whether it's the 4th pick from Indy or a pick from Atlanta, you have that. So to me, I feel like the situation just has to end for both sides to move forward one way or the other, because the Ravens, they just haven't had an offseason at this point. It just feels like the whole offseason's been Lamar. And, we're seeing guys like Nelson Aguilar brought in for a visit. That's also contributing to the negativity from the Ravens fan base in that survey. But how do you feel about that? Do you feel like this has to end? And are you ready for it to end one way or the other? Or do you still hold out hope for one possibility to become true?
Oh, I mean, it's just a waiting game right now. And I do think it would be best if whatever's going to happen, it ends up happening. And I would love for it to happen before the draft. So whether it's Lamar and the Ravens and they know how they're going to move forward together before the draft, great. Or if it's Lamar and he ends up on another team, then that other team and the Ravens, they both know how they're going to move forward at the draft. I would love for that to happen because I don't think either party should continue to allow this thing to go on past this season or even past this upcoming draft. I would love for there to be a resolution. And that resolution, it may be a resolution that has a lot of people smiling or it may be a resolution that has a lot of people frowning. I mean, either way, there's going to be a lot of people doing both depending on how they feel. But I just really think that this thing, it should come to an end so both parties can move forward and that can be that.
Yeah, and I like that point you made about the draft. Let's talk about that in the second segment. We'll head into our first break here on Locked On Ravens. Coming up, we'll talk about Ingraven's point about the draft and why this situation definitely, I think, should end before then and why I think it has to at this point. So be sure to stay tuned. Still lots to dive into on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and the tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. They think about on anything from the money line to point scores and threes, drains, and Sweet 16 action starting up here in the tournament. My bracket's been busted. I had Purdue, so I've been out since like the second day. But they have so many more exclusive bets as well on FanDuel, like the 2x3, which is 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at big up payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss this chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back here. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with IngravenVids. And Ingraven, I like what you said about the draft and, why you hope it ends before then. Because I think if you go past the draft, there's so much more uncertainty. And if a solution happens where, let's say the Ravens do move on from Lamar, he leaves for the 2 first-round picks or they trade him or whatever it is, the draft is gone. You can't take anybody. You could maybe sign a couple of guys here and there. But if you trade Lamar to let's use the Colts. I feel like people are kind of on the Lamar to the Colts train if that's a realistic possibility. You get the 4th pick. You get a pick next year. If you wait till after the draft and those 2 picks go, I mean, Ingraven, you're talking about a pick that's probably in the 20s because the Colts are going to be competitive with Lamar. Another pick that's going to be in the 20s. So you lose out on that potential top 5 pick, depending on what the Ravens would do with it, whether they trade back, get more, take a quarterback there. But you don't know what your needs are. You don't know what you need to do fully. Eric DeCosta talked about how there are multiple paths, 5, 6, 7 paths, depending on what happens with Lamar, whether he stays, whether he goes, extension, franchise tag, trade. But until you have that 100% certainty that a certain solution is going to happen, you just can't move fully forward. And I think we're seeing that. So, I mean, how concerned would you be if, we end draft weekend and Lamar still is at a crossroads with the team?
That would be a little bit surprising, but at the same time, it wouldn't be surprising because it seems like both parties they really gonna drag this thing out. I don't know who's gonna budge first, who's gonna cave first, who's gonna compromise a little bit more first. We just gotta wait and see. But if this thing goes past the draft, like you mentioned, that changes everything, and it just shifts everything to next year now. And I think if it goes past the draft, then that really removes a lot of the urgency that could be there right now since it's pre-draft. If Ravens are, whether they're thinking about a regular trade or they're thinking about the offer sheet type of trade to get the 2 first, they would definitely want to get something this year. Like you mentioned, they're going to want to get something in the 2023 draft and not have to wait. I'm sure they're going to want something in the 2024 draft as well, but they're going to want to make sure they get something this year for sure. But if it goes past the draft, then you have to wait. You have to wait even longer. And so Lamar on his side, they've been waiting on this thing for years. This whole negotiation has been going on for years, and they made it this far. So what's another couple of months gonna do? What's another couple of months gonna change? It wouldn't change much for them. So I'm sure they wouldn't mind if it does get past the draft, but hopefully it just doesn't. If it does go past the draft, though, I think you would have a lot more clarity on the possibility of teams that could be interested in Lamar. Because if it gets past the draft, then all right, the 2023 draft is over. All the quarterbacks, they've been selected. And a lot of teams, their rosters are pretty much set. Of course, there's still plenty of moves to be made, but a lot of teams' rosters, for the most part, are set after the draft because we moved past the first and second wave of free agency. We went through the draft, and now it's like, you can sign some different undrafted free agents. You could still sign current NFL veteran free agents and whatnot. But I would say probably about 80% of your roster is set. So that would eliminate a lot of teams from the Lamar sweepstakes, but it could possibly add some too who maybe didn't get the quarterback that they wanted or whose situation is looking a little bleak right now, depending on what happens. So it's this whole thing is just it's a process. It's like a process after a process, and it's like when you feel like it's taking one step further, which it has, of course, with the franchise tag. That was the first step. It's like it has so many other routes and so many other steps that it could take, and so many other possibilities.
Yeah, and I think one that's interesting to me, and it's something I've brought up on my show, and I want to actually get your thoughts on it because I think it's interesting, is the Kirk Cousins route, where you play on 2 franchise tags for Lamar. Lamar, reportedly, apparently, we don't know what's true anymore, but apparently he wants that fully guaranteed contract. Obviously, the franchise tag Ingraven, if you play on that, it's fully guaranteed all the way through. You can have 2 franchise tags you can play on. Now, exclusive versus non-exclusive, Lamar lost out on about $13 million by not getting the actual exclusive tag. But if fully guaranteed is what he's after, he can play on the franchise tag this year. He can get it again next year at probably a higher number because the cap's always going up with the TV deals. And then hit free agency again when he's 28 and potentially get this huge contract. And maybe by that point, maybe a Jalen Hurts gets a fully guaranteed deal. Maybe it's Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence. And then Lamar, I think, has a better case to say, hey, look, these guys are getting it. Now I want it. And that's that. And that's fine. Well, Lamar is trying to be, the second guy to get this huge 5-year. Well, we don't know. Actually, we don't know what's going on. But at the same time, he could be just saying, hey, you know what? I want to get this fully guaranteed money 2 years in a row, and then hit free agency again when I'm sure at this point, I know a lot of people are talking about the injuries with Lamar, the 2 straight season-ending injuries. It's a risk to play on the franchise tag, definitely, especially when you already have had those 2 injuries. And I know those were in the pocket. They were not running injuries. And I know there's some stigma behind that. But do you feel like that's a realistic possibility, Ingraven, for him to play on these franchise tags for 2 years?
I don't see him going that route. Not the franchise tag. I don't even see him really playing on the franchise tag this year. It is obviously a possibility, but I just can't see him doing it, especially after how last season ended, and even the year prior too. I think Lamar wants more of a commitment from the Ravens, financial commitment. And I know there's been a lot of the back and forth over the guaranteed money, the actual fully guaranteed money from jump, and the most likely guaranteed money that's not guaranteed up front, but he would most likely get it. And there's been a whole back and forth with that. But I don't think he would go that Kirk Cousins route. And with Kirk Cousins, like when you look back at it, like when was he? I forgot what year he was drafted. Was it 2012 with RG3? But whatever year it was, after his rookie contract ran out, yeah, he's been getting fully guaranteed ever since because he's been on nothing but franchise tags, and then eventually that fully guaranteed deal, well, both fully guaranteed deals from the Vikings. So Kirk Cousins is sort of a trendsetter with that. Not even Deshaun Watson, but Kirk Cousins. But anyway, I wouldn't anticipate Lamar Jackson playing on a franchise tag, especially if the negotiations they've gotten this far with no deal. I can't see him being like, all right, you know what? Let me just ride it out on his franchise tag this year, and then we'll get back to it in another year. No, I think that he wants this thing resolved. I think he's going to want this thing hammered out, and I think he's going to want a resolution for this contract this year, whether it be with the Ravens or it ends up being with somebody else.
Yeah, and you talk about with somebody else, it feels like Lamar obviously gives the Ravens, I think, their best and most realistic chance to win a Super Bowl this year. I mean, you're not having a Mahomes walk through that door, no Josh Allen's, no Joe Burrows. We can debate the rankings of those quarterbacks another time. It's a different conversation, but Lamar is a franchise quarterback for some team, whether it's Baltimore or somebody else. But Ingraven, when you're talking about him potentially leaving, going somewhere else, what do you do there if you're the Ravens? Do you have a Tyler Huntley bridge period for a year? Do you use the first round pick depending on what it is? And we don't know what it would be, but do you use that on one of these 4 quarterbacks? Do you some of the bridge guys have already gone off the map right now. Andy Dalton in Carolina, Marcus Mariota going to the Eagles. I mean, what would your solution be? Because it feels like this defense is so good, and they showed that they were so good last year, that they can carry this team to an extent. They can keep this team somewhat competitive. Lamar raises that ceiling, obviously, so much. But how competitive do you think this team is without Lamar, depending on what they do with the quarterback position?
That is one thing about the Baltimore Ravens. When they haven't had Lamar, they have still been competitive, but they ain't been winners, like straight up. So they will still need to find a way to score a lot more points than they have without Lamar. Because without Lamar, it's ugly. It can get really ugly. And I know they can talk about, oh, we got close, we almost got them. There could be a lot of moral victories, but moral victories ain't cutting it, my friends. So with that being said, if Lamar ends up going elsewhere and the Ravens have to have another plan at quarterback, I think it all depends on what compensation that they get for Lamar Jackson going elsewhere and how they really feel about the quarterbacks in this draft versus quarterbacks in next year's draft. If they are not in a position to get anybody that they really love in this year's draft, I think they would just ride it out with Tyler Huntley. I think they would ride it out with him this year and sort of, but you do make a really good point about the defense and everything that they put into that. So because what I was thinking before is that if they trade Lamar and they just roll with Tyler Huntley this year, if they don't like any of the quarterbacks, so they're not in a position to get any of the quarterbacks in this draft that they like, then this year will sort of be a wash for them. But what you mentioned in the defense, which is true, all the investment that they put in the defense, obviously a first round draft pick last year, Kyle Hamilton, signing Marcus Williams to that big deal, trading for Roquan Smith, and then signing him to that big deal. They got some pieces, obviously Marlon Humphrey too, David Ajabo, who could be coming on strong in his second year, hopefully, Adafe Away, who we hoping makes a big jump in. I mean, we can continue to go down the list, but the defense certainly has some pieces that are ready right here, right now. So I don't think the Ravens are going to want it to really be a wash this year. They're going to want to compete as much as they possibly can. But I think that they actually would roll with Tyler Huntley if that was the case. I think with Tyler Huntley, he's got a lot more experience. He is not Lamar Jackson, and that's obviously not a shot at Tyler Huntley. Tyler Huntley is Tyler Huntley, but Lamar Jackson is just Lamar Jackson. But if they could really just find a way to put more points on the board with Tyler Huntley, I think they would just exhaust that. They would exhaust all options with him. They got a new scheme, a new offensive coordinator with Todd Monken now. So hopefully, having the offenses run, they'll be able to put up a lot more points than they did before. And that's whether Lamar Jackson is here or not. Even if Lamar Jackson is here, you still want the Ravens to put up a lot more points. So I think if it does come down to that, if Lamar is gone, I think everything just depends on the draft too. Everything depends on the draft, the draft capital that they have, the position that they're in the draft, and if they can get a young quarterback that they like, I still think that they will roll with Tyler Huntley at that. And if that's the case, I don't think they would just throw that quarterback right out there. I still think they would roll with Huntley and then maybe have that quarterback be ready next year. I don't think that they would just throw him out there, especially if this is a year where, you still got a lot of defensive players that are ready and some offensive players too. Like you obviously have an investment in Ronnie Stanley. You have an investment in Mark Andrews. You got J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards on the last year of their contract. So, the Ravens are going to try to milk everything that they possibly can out of those two. I think it will be Huntley though, regardless if it's a rookie quarterback or not.
Yeah, and that's the situation that I think a lot of Ravens fans, for Lamar coming in here, becoming a franchise quarterback, if you're the Ravens, all the years of, quarterback mediocrity that they've had over the course of their franchise history, it's almost like, well, if Lamar leaves, there's no guarantee you hit on another guy. It's the quarterback, the rookie draft classes every single season. Lamar was a great find for them. They did their homework. They built their offense around him, and that's awesome. But there's no guarantee the next guy comes in and is that for them. I get the whole rookie contract thing, and we'll talk about that in the final 7. It's an interesting point. But I think either way, you're right. And, I made the point about the defense where I just think this defense would not let them tank for a Caleb Williams or someone like that in the next draft. So then you're in like a weird spot where you're like, well, we want to be competitive. We have the defense too, but the quarterback position is the most important position on the field, and you got to have somebody there to help you win football games. So coming up, we will talk about the Ravens, their offseason so far, what they can do moving forward, Lamar's rookie contract, as I talked about, and a lot more. Don't go anywhere. Still lots to talk about on the show. We're back here, our final segment, Locked On Ravens, here on Thursday. Kevin Oestreicher still here with IngravenVids. And Ingraven, let's start with the Lamar rookie contract talk, because there are a lot of people, and I kind of feel this way as well, the Ravens almost failed Lamar in a way on his rookie deal. We saw, let's just look at teams throughout the rest of the league. The Bills go out there, get Stephon Diggs for Josh Allen. The Cardinals go out there, get DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown for Kyler Murray. The Eagles go out there, get Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. You know, I could go on and on and on. But the Ravens with Lamar, you know, they invested, as you talked about in that last segment, they've been a heavy defensive investing team. Where the secondary, it seems like they invest all their money in that secondary. Marlon Humphrey, there's a $100 million contract. Marcus Williams, $70 million. They gave Marcus Peters $40. Not saying those guys didn't deserve those deals. They obviously did. But I think what people want to see is some of that defensive spending money put back into the offensive side of the ball, specifically wide receiver. And the Ravens didn't do that when they had a franchise quarterback on a, you know, I don't know the exact cap hits, but an $8 million cap hit, a $10 million, those second, third year, fourth year cap hits. The Ravens didn't do anything there. And instead they rolled into the year with, you know, a Sammy Watkins, or, you know, they didn't address it and they had to sign Deshaun Jackson. I mean, do you feel like the Ravens could have done a lot more for Lamar when he was on his rookie deal on the offensive side of the ball?
Oh yeah, for sure. We talk about this a lot. Because I feel like they messed up big time. And we hear about, again, the moral victories. That moral victories aren't enough, because we hear about, Ravens tried. Ravens gave it a shot. They tried to trade for this guy. They tried to sign that guy. They tried to trade for DeAndre Hopkins before. They tried to sign Juju Smith-Schuster. They tried to sign T.Y. Hill, and they tried to sign this guy and that guy and whatnot. But the point is, they didn't get it done. They didn't get it done. And they didn't get it done when Lamar was at his cheapest. Now, with the Ravens, 2018, I'm cool with that, because that was still Flacco's team. 2019, I'm cool with that too, because that was Lamar's breakout year. But 2020, 2021, and 2022, no. They should have done a lot more in those years. Especially after that MVP year, it's like, oh man, Lamar did what with who? Oh, wow, he did all that with them? Okay, you know what? Let's really get the best out of this guy, and let's give him one of those guys, one of the best, and let's really, really upgrade this thing and see how far he and they can take us. But they didn't. They never did it. And yeah, they did. I always hear about, the Ravens spent the most draft capital at wide receiver over these past couple of years. They have, but it's certainly quality over quantity. Of course, Rashad Bateman, I think he's going to be really good. I really do. Obviously, it's a matter of just staying on the field. Hollywood Brown, I liked him. He was a big contributor, especially come playoff time for the Ravens, but he's gone. But the Ravens really never provided Lamar with that quality that they could have and should have while he was on his rookie deal. So now, rookie deal's gone. 5th-year option, that's gone as well. And last year was definitely a year where I was like, okay, they didn't do it the previous year. All right, they didn't do it the year before that. 5th-year option. Then negotiations with Lamar. I felt like, all right, they gotta go out and really get a really good receiver for Lamar to pair him with Bateman and the Devin Duvernay and Prochet, and they're gonna do it this year, right? Because this is contract year. It's all or nothing, and you really want to go all out. But no, didn't do it. So the thing is with the Ravens, I felt like they never really fully believed in Lamar like that. And I feel like the way that they ran the offense, I feel like they still had questions about him. So if you have questions about something or somebody, then you will want to do what you can do to get the answers about them. Ravens didn't do that. So they wasted a big opportunity, huge opportunity. And I felt like they never put themselves in a position to get the best out of Lamar. They never put themselves in a position to where you can really maximize who Lamar Jackson is. And they never really pushed him to his limits. He's obviously showed plenty of potential, showed he can do some crazy things, showed he still got to work on some things too. But the Ravens never pushed it there. They never went all in for him. And that's been one of the most frustrating things about these first 5 years, but more so really the past 3 years. So now it's like, all right, they have $7 million cap space. Lamar's on the franchise tag right now. Like you mentioned earlier, you could sign him to an extension and that can lower his cap hit for this year and the next couple of years and whatnot. But then what are you going to do? What are you going to do at the position then? Because you've shown us what you're not going to do there when he was cheaper. What are you going to do now that he's more expensive? So there's a lot of questions right there. He did bring up Nelson Aguilar earlier because they had him in for a visit. And my opinion, Nelson Aguilar would not be a bad addition if he's not the guy. If he's a complimentary guy, cool, no problem. But if he's one of your top guys, no, that it can't fly. So we'll see how these Ravens get down. But again, back to your question, had they failed him, especially over these past 3 years, they did, and they just failed to maximize his talent.
And you're with the wide receiver position in general. I mean, it's important nowadays that you have good corners and good wide receivers alongside, obviously, your skill position players where, you're talking about premium positions, quarterback, offensive tackle, wide receiver, corner, some of those key positions. The Ravens have Marlon Humphrey. That's your stud number one star corner, but he's proven, who Marlon Humphrey is. You can take a corner in this first round in this draft. He's still going to need to learn the NFL a little bit, even if he's really, really good as rookie season. I think for me, it's one thing to have a star young player and a star veteran player. I think the Ravens, Rashad Bateman's been injured for the past couple of seasons, but I agree with you, Ingraven, where I think he can be really, really, really good. But imagine someone else, imagine a veteran star next to him, and imagine him with Mark Andrews in that offense too. It would add another element. And then we're looking at this wide receiver class and the way the Ravens have kind of navigated this offseason. It honestly wasn't a very strong class to begin with. I mean, the top guys were the Allen Lazards, Jacoby Myers, Juju, Odell's in there too. But after a lot of whittling down, because obviously teams are signing guys, the Ravens haven't done that yet. You now are kind of left with, on the free agent market, it's Odell, it's DJ Chark, who I'm not opposed to either of those guys. Odell not at $20 million per season, but I think Odell still has stuff left in the tank. Then you look at the trade market. It's, because you get a DeAndre Hopkins, because you get a Cortland Sutton, a Jerry Jeudy. I mean, what do you want to see them do at this position? Do you feel like a free agent signing like an Odell or DJ Chark is the best option, or do you want to see him swing for the fences and go after a guy like a DeAndre Hopkins, who could be, we talk about former Arizona Cardinals wide receivers, could be the Anquan Bolden acquisition if it works out for Baltimore.
Hey, I would love that if they got DeAndre Hopkins. I would love for them to try it. I would even love if they got Mike Evans. But I would love if they got one of those guys, but they also got somebody else too. So where you would have a DeAndre Hopkins or Rashad Bateman, and then one more guy via free agency. And then there's still the draft as well. But I would love the Ravens to really just go all out. I don't expect them to, but I would love for them to. It's tricky, though. It's tough because when we talk about the wide receiver position, especially right now, and thinking about a guy like a DeAndre Hopkins, thinking about a guy like Mike Evans, even thinking about free agents like Odell Beckham Jr., and other guys that may be out there, DJ Chark too, like you mentioned, we may be thinking about those guys, but those guys as receivers are thinking about number 8. And if the Ravens even approached him, then they're going to ask, because they're going to want to know, like, hey, what's up with your quarterback situation? What's going on with Lamar? Because they have to wonder that, because this is their careers that are on the line. Like, hey, is Lamar going to be there? So before they had even entertained an offer from the Ravens, especially like with DeAndre Hopkins, because I'm not sure if he still has the no trade clause in his contract or not. I do think I heard something where it said the PD violation that he got last year that like negated the no trade clause, I think, but I'm not 1,000% sure on that. But either way, if teams are talking to the Ravens, these receivers are talking to the Ravens, that's got to be the number one thing on their mind. Like, yeah, I could go there. Y'all not a bad franchise, but who's gonna be throwing me the ball? So that's got to be a huge concern. Now, obviously, not just for us fans about what's going on with Lamar Jackson, but for players too who could potentially go to the Ravens.
Yeah, and you make a good point, because I think when receivers were also, now it's definitely they're thinking about, well, who's the quarterback going to be, and maybe that's the holdup. And we saw that with the offensive coordinator situation too, where reports came out that some coordinators were, they were very concerned about, what what's the court? Is it going to be Lamar Jackson? Is it going to be a rookie? Is it going to be somebody else? To kind of have that uncertainty at the position. But I think in previous years in Graven, it wasn't about Lamar. I think people wanted to come play with Lamar. It was in a Greg Roman type of offense. They knew that they weren't good, and everybody has their different preferences of what they wanted out of their careers. Is it winning? Is it money? Is it stats? Whatever it may be. But for guys, I put out this Jarvis Landry situation all the time, where Landry, the Baltimore versus New Orleans conundrum, where you can choose to go to Baltimore and New Orleans, and you're looking to kind of rebuild your value on a one-year deal. Would you go to Baltimore, where they're a run-heavy team, receivers are known in that offense to not get the ball, you get maybe 3 or 4 targets a game, or would you go to New Orleans, where they're airing the ball out and you get targets? Now, Landry, didn't do a ton last year, but the point remains where even Juju on I think it was the Michael Irvin podcast. I still don't remember, but I think it was. He said it wasn't about Lamar, it's that they run the ball a lot. And that's why I chose to go back to Pittsburgh that one season. So I think people, they want to see Lamar in a Todd. I think it's just they want to see Lamar in a different offensive system in Baltimore. We've seen him in the Greg Roman offense. Obviously, Marty Mornhinweg was that year in 2018 before they moved on, committed to Greg Roman. But they want to see Lamar in a Todd Monken offense, which I think can be a dominant pass team. And I think Lamar can be a dominant passing quarterback. He's shown that. But they want to see him in that offense with a star-proven wide receiver like a DeAndre Hopkins, like a Cortland Sutton, like a Jerry Jeudy, Mike Evans, as you mentioned, too. So we'll see. But this situation continues to drag out with Lamar. Hopefully someday we'll get a resolution. It feels like we'll never get one. But hopefully, as Ingraven said, before the draft, I think that's the key checkpoint before the draft. Hopefully something changes. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Ingraven, thank you so much for hopping on here, joining me. Please tell people where they can find you and what you're working on right now.
Oh, for sure. I appreciate you having me on. You can find me IngravenVids. That's the YouTube channel, but that's also Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of that good stuff, where we post videos daily, whether it be about the Ravens or just whatever is going on currently in the NFL. So feel free to check it out. You're more than welcome to subscribe. This team, keep it clean.
The links will be in the description below. Ingraven does great work. He works hard. Be sure to reward him for his hard work. Subscribe to his channel and support him in all he does. Ingraven, I appreciate you again. Thank you so much. And be sure to subscribe here on YouTube in audio form. It is free, no money involved. You can come back as much as you want to here on the channel. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you again so much for tuning in today. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be rounding out the week. More Ravens content here. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you right back here tomorrow.